All right, so we're going to get this show on the road. Just a few reminders. The meeting is being recorded, so just keep that in mind. The other thing that gets recorded is the chat box. So just keep that in mind too. If you think you're having a private conversation with somebody, you're not. It gets recorded and downloaded as part of the transcript of the meeting. For those of you joining us with the video, reminder to keep yourself muted while you're not talking. And when you need to talk, you can either click on the microphone icon or just hold down the space bar. And you need to hold down the space bar the whole time you're talking, because when you release it, it will mute you again. If you're joining us on the telephone, it's *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand if you need to. We have a couple of items of public testimony that I'm going to share on the screen and then read aloud for you. So, Alicia, just nod your head if you can see that.
Hold on 1 second. I'm having some technical difficulties again.
Susan, nod your head if you can see that.
I don't know if you can see me.
I can see you.
Okay, you see me? Okay, yes, I see that.
Okay. All right, so public testimony, the first one is from Wendy Brower from Green Map System. Yesterday, the DOT announced an open streets plan that will help people keep their distance. Hats off to Councilmember Rivera for her leadership on this timely policy. As I understand it, DOT will soon be opening applications to community groups to request barricades and set hours to welcome local residents to walk and cycle safely on open streets. I urge CB3 to encourage this effort. I also request that CB3 ask DOT to indemnify all of the open streets projects, making it far more equitable for block associations, lower income, and smaller groups to participate in this important community health initiative. Thank you. The second item of public testimony comes from Joe Kearns, and it just states, I am running a nonprofit to help deliver non-medical PPE to New Yorkers. We provide PPE to the communities who need it most during the fight. Oh, the website is covid.cm. We provide PPE to the communities who need it most during the fight against COVID-19. Started by New York City native Ben Way on March 12th, 2020. The foundation aims to become a platform for PPE distribution, funding efforts, partnerships, and exchanges on issues related to COVID-19. It is a registered 501c3 nonprofit, and it is 100% volunteer run. We launched a Million Masks campaign, which has raised over $600,000 to date and donated 15,000 surgical N95 and KN95 respirators to 25 of New York City's most overwhelmed hospitals to protect frontline hospital workers. Their ask is that we'd love any volunteers to help us with the effort and for any electeds to partner with them in finding distribution partners. There's no contact information on this, but I will say that this public testimony is being done by a board member in a public, as a private citizen. So as many of you know, Joe is a CB3 board member, so other CB3 board members can contact him that way if they are interested in helping out with this effort. So that is the end of the public testimony session. So we are going to move now to the Electives Reports. And before we get started with that, I just want to say that we have, I should say Susan has spent an immense amount of time over the past couple of days trying to coordinate the electeds. We don't want to get into a situation like we were in last month where the Electives Reports took over 2.5 hours. So we're going to be starting, so we've organized them the best way we can, and unfortunately things change. Everyone has other meetings to get to and other town halls that they're holding, and you know, the past hour we've been dealing with emails coming in from people asking for their time to change, and we're just going to do the best we can, and if they're still on to talk to us, they're still on to talk to us. But we have asked each elected official to keep their report to 10 minutes, And those 10 minutes include the Q&A session. So if they take their whole 10 minutes to talk to us, then we're not going to be doing Q&A for that elected official. If they talk and then there's still time, we will take some questions. I do also want to point out that since we are running this as a webinar, there is a Q&A function attached to this. You should see an icon for it at the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer. So we can use that function. If for some reason you're not able to ask a question to an elected official, you can type it in there, and hopefully the electeds will keep an eye on the Q&A box and they'll type in their responses to you. So again, we're keeping each elected to 10 minutes. Their reps are getting 5 minutes. Again, that includes the Q&A session. And we are going to start with Congressmember Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you. I'm honored to join you. I think one thing that's going to happen is we're going to be communicating this way in the future a lot more. Before I start, I want to say that I hope everyone on the call is safe at home and well. I want to begin by asking everyone, have you filled out your census form? It's very, very important. You can go to the web, you can go to the internet and put in My 2020 Census, fill it out online. You can do it by phone. They've mailed them to your home. It's important because it is the formula that is used to dispense over $800 billion a year for schools, hospitals, and job training and other essential services. I did a study this week that showed that if we are undercounted by 1%, it will be a loss of over 650,000 to our neighborhood schools, over 250,000 for our job training. Also, the census numbers determine your representation on the city, state, and federal level. So it's important. Please get your community to fill them out. And it's for 10 years. So if we mess it up this time, it'll be 10 years where we're underfunded. I do want to say that imagine if we'd been underfunded right now with all of the hospital workers and people that we need. The average return rate for the country is now 52%, but our district, the 12th district, it's roughly 40%. And we are under what we were 10 years ago. So we have a lot of work to get our numbers up. We have been working incredibly hard in Washington. We have passed 4 different relief packages to help with disaster. The largest one was the largest in history, $2.2 trillion. It had $350 billion for the Small Business Relief Fund, the so-called Paycheck Protection Act. Within 10 days, all that money was gone. So we just voted recently an additional $484 billion package. Again, a lot of money for small businesses, but money's also for our hospitals and for testing. Not enough, it's never enough, but if we don't test and do follow-up on who's testing positive and not, and we'll never be able to open up again. We were supposed to go back into session on May 4th, but the medical community really complained and said it wasn't safe to have 435 people going back to Washington when we are still in the epidemic. So we are now scheduled to go back on May 15th. The one piece that was left out that is very important was funding for state and local governments. Both the mayor and the governor have pleaded with us that their revenues are down, they have gaps in their budget, and if they don't get city and state funding, then they will have to start layoffs, which is going to be a terrible thing for our people. So that is the top priority. We're already working on the next package to make that happen. As the chair of the Oversight Committee, I have a responsibility for the post office, and they're going to run out of money this summer. Can you imagine how many people are getting their medicines by mail, communicating by mail, and now our governor tells us we're going to be voting by mail. So we have to save the post office and make sure that it is funded. Unbelievably, the Republicans are not supporting it. So it is a real emergency to make sure that it gets the funds it desperately needs. The Paycheck Protection Program and the emergency injury disaster loans are very popular in our district. Many people are applying for it. I'm sure that'll run out of money probably by the end of the week. And the 1,200 individual rebate. The IRS will be distributing the rebates to all Americans who earned under $99,000 and households which earned under $190,000 based on their 2019 and 2018 filings. So if you did pay your filings and meet that criteria, you don't have to do anything. The IRS will be mailing out this grant to you. And you will receive 1,200 as an individual, 2,400 for joint filers, plus 500 for each child under 17. And that will be coming to you in the mail. And for individuals on Social Security or Social Security disability insurance, the Social Security Administration is working with the IRS to make sure they get your rebate to you. And for other non-filers, you are also eligible, but may need to take additional steps. The IRS will be doing outreach, and you can contact my office for questions. The bill also established a paycheck protection program and made it eligible for sole proprietors, independent contractors, gig economy workers like artists and others, and self-employed individuals. They're all eligible to apply. I'm proud of the Democratic Party for expanding the eligibility to include these other categories. And this is a loan program for businesses with less than 500 employees. It provides cash flow assistance with 100% federally guaranteed loans.
It's
to help
sad not
employees.
hearing all the activity in the room before the meeting.
Okay. In any event, this program is more than a loan. It's a grant program. If you pay 75% of the total loan directly to your employees to keep them on board or just keep them receiving money, and you will get, and 25% for your rent and other expenses, you'll get 100% loan forgiveness. So that's really a grant. We've had some difficulties with it. It's supposed to be open to everyone who's an SBA lender, but some banks are writing their own rules. Let me know if they are doing so. One constituent told me they went to the bank. They said they're only doing loans over $100,000. I had to call them. You don't get to write the rules. It's supposed to be eligible to everyone. But in this new round, we funded or siphoned off or corded off $60 billion for really small businesses. And this money will be distributed through credit unions, minority institutions, CDFIs, which were created for unbanked low-income people, and micro lenders that are participating in the program. And this will be protected and used only for small businesses. And I know there are a lot of allegations about misuse already in this program. And as the chair of the Oversight Committee, we are sending out letters for accountability, tracking where these loans are going. And I called the SBA today. I want a listing of who's getting loans in my district. I want to make sure that we are treated fairly under this program. I've also wrote a letter to the SBA to expand the eligibility of this loan program so that nonprofits and charitable organizations of all sizes can participate. And we have many of those in our community. The economic injury disaster loans is also available. It's up to $2 million with payment plans as long as 30 years and a deferment on interest payments for 4 years. So these are very generous. With also,
sorry, you got about 2 minutes left in case you wanted to leave time for questions.
Oh, there's all kinds of activity going on. I have so much more to tell you what I've been doing, but I'd rather hear from you. So thank you for informing me, and I open myself up to any questions or comments. And what do you want to see in this next package? We're already working on it.
So Olympia, you had your hand up first, so I'm going to go to you. It looks like you're probably the only question.
So thank you. Fundamentally, I know you're trying to do a lot, and it's very good that you segregated those 60 billion for real small businesses because they really didn't get to access any of the loans. That's what we're hearing. The issue is that right now, a lot of the federal funds are not yet available. People who applied for the pandemic unemployment, they haven't yet seen a penny, most of them. And the reality is that the rent was due on April 1st, the rent is due on May 1st. So since there is this difficulty of accessing the relief in the various forms that it exists out there for the people who are really most in need, and then there is no movement yet on the legislation, even though I know it has been introduced now, even at the federal level, about rent suspension, I think you need to try to focus to help more the ones more in need. And in the next CARES Act passage, you also need somehow to address the people that are left out so far, the dreamers, and all these other cash economy people who are not going to be perceiving the $1,200 each. And to be honest, New York rents, that's not going to go very far with unemployment for 3, 6, 8 months and more.
Well, first of all, we need to, we tried to get in the rent relief and the rent freeze. I'm on the banking committee too, and I got a letter, and I got people, the Congress people, to support it, where they're freezing any mortgage foreclosure under federal mortgages, so that they won't be moving in that area. But most of the people in our district are renters, 70% are. And we pushed hard for that. We were not able to achieve it. We pushed hard for the state and federal loan program. I know that the state unemployment has been flooded. We are all teleworking from home in my office. We're all practicing the health guidelines they gave us. But you can call my office and we can get a caseworker on your individual cases. And any abuses that you have or stories on the loan program being misused, as I said, some constituents told me, they just told me, we're not going to do a loan that small. They're not supposed to make those decisions. They're supposed to give it for everybody. But they gamed it and gave it to the bigger people. Some of them we sort of shamed so much they gave back the money and got out of it. It's not supposed to be for hedge funds and large corporations. And I think we'll be adjusting that or asking them to give it back because it's unfair and not what the program was for. So a lot of it, we moved very quickly because people are in need. Now the dreamers, we tried to help the dreamers and undocumented. I'm talking about Democrats. I'm a Democrat. The Republicans would not have anything to do with it. But one of the ways that we did provide money, the Paycheck Protection Act is largely for employees. 75% of that money has to go for employees, and there's no thing that says it can't go to dreamers or other people. So that's one way to get money to people who desperately need it. As you know, we have to work with the Senate, and it's not easy. Already, Mitch McConnell has told us under no circumstances will he allow state and city aid. Yet our mayor and governor are telling me and the delegation that if we don't get it, there are going to be serious layoffs because there's a huge gap in revenues, and then the cost of this pandemic has been overwhelming, as we all know, the pain, the suffering, the death. So I hope that answered your question. If you have more, I have one person working totally on the PPP program because it's in such so many problems with it. And in any event, it's not enough, but with 26,000 people unemployed, we have more people unemployed than the Great Depression. The economic shocks are greater than the Great Depression. So we have a challenge and a half ahead of us. And we've already lost more people than 9/11, the Korean War, and Vietnam. It's been a deadly, deadly disease. It's the worst challenge I've faced since I've been in office. And it's I've been through a lot of difficult times with all of you, with Sandy and economic downturn, and of course, 9/11. I just want to mention one of my signature bills was the 9/11 Health and Compensation Bill to help take care of the workers. Took me a long time to pass it. It's now law, thank God. But I am putting in a bill to do the same type of thing for the pandemic workers. Our nurses and our doctors, many of them are sick. Many of people on the front lines helping people. I'd say our postal workers, our emergency workers who are out there, interacting with COVID people every day and oftentimes becoming sick themselves. We have to take care of them, and that's a priority of mine legislatively. I yield back.
All right, so thank you, Congresswoman. I think we're having some issues with the Q&A function, and there are 4 more hands raised, but we're already at 20 minutes for the first elected official. So I really want to move on here, folks.
No.
And I think
listen, send me your questions to my office and we'll answer them, okay?
yeah, all of the elected officials are also doing newsletters on a regular basis, some of them daily. So I encourage you to subscribe to those if you can. And I'm really sorry we don't have more time, Congresswoman, but we're trying to get this meeting.
I have a newsletter that goes out daily on everything on the federal level. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Electives.gov. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. My honor to be with you. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna, there were 2 people that one wanted an earlier time and one wanted a later time. So we're just gonna swap them. So we're gonna go to Brad Hoyleman next. And we're gonna have Carlina Rivera, then Margaret Chin, then Deborah Glick, then Brian Kavanaugh, then Harvey Epstein, and then Yuli Neal.
I will be super brief, Michael. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to get through this meeting quickly. I just wanted to thank Congresswoman Maloney first for her efforts in which I joined in attempting to repeal the discriminatory and homophobic FDA gay men blood ban. If you're a gay man, you cannot donate blood unless you've been celibate for a year. I sent a letter to the FDA, so did Congresswoman Maloney. The FDA has since reduced that to 3 months. So now you can't have sex for 3 months if you want to donate blood and you're a gay man. I guess that's progress, but there's still more work to be done, especially since plasma is so important when folks who have recovered from COVID-19 can contribute and hopefully aid to people's health and research. My colleague Caroline is on the Zoom with us. She's been doing an amazing job. We have been inundated with unemployment insurance requests, as we should be. That is totally our job. Each one of us, including me, are doing casework. It seems every hour of the day, right, Caroline? And we've made some progress. I know some of you have heard back recently from the Department of Labor. Let us know. Please contact us. Caroline will put our email in the chat function. We can help. I know other elected officials are doing it too. I'm working every channel. Just so happens, David Kruger, who used to work in my office, I know Susan knows him, now works for the Department of Labor. So just saying that I am working that connection as much as I can. We've also been working with our colleagues, each and every one of them, in coordinating volunteers. I want to thank them for all their work, including distributing meals, leveraging different parts of our districts, like the management company at Stuytown Peter Cooper, which is owned by Blackstone. They've been donating, multi-billion-dollar company. They've been donating meals, which has been amazing. And Harvey Epstein and Keith Powers and Carlina have worked, to distribute those meals, and I'm very happy to be part of that. And then I wanted to tell you about one bill, and then I'll go, which is, I think, top of mind for so many people in our district. As the Congresswoman noted, so many renters, is how are you going to pay the rent? How are you going to pay the rent if you're sick? How are you going to pay the rent if you've lost your job? How are you going to pay the rent if you've got 2 kids at home who are being homeschooled and you have a loved one who's on a respirator? I mean, I can't imagine just how grim it is for so many of our neighbors. So I'm in strong support of the cancel rent movement, along with our assembly members who are on the line, Assembly Member Yuli New and Harvey Epstein, among others, of course, Deborah Glick. And we not only are pushing that, but I introduced a bill with Senator Kruger called the New York State Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which would add to the governor's evictions. His eviction moratorium only lasts until June 18th. And the problem is, on June 19th, landlords could file for evictions and we could see mass evictions across the city. What I propose through this Tenant Safe Harbor Act is to give tenants 6 months, not just beyond June 18th, but beyond the end of the state of emergency, where they can get back on their feet, get healthy, get their jobs back, and then be responsible for rent. So I hope we can move that legislation along with the cancel rent movement. And then I've been hosting virtual town halls with a number of my colleagues. This week's was on the cancel rent movement with Senator Mike Giannaris. So I encourage you to tune in Sundays at 8 p.m., 8 to 9. But in the meantime, please contact our office for any constituent concerns. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Hope everyone is well, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
it's 7
Senator.
o'clock if you haven't heard.
Yeah, it's 7 o'clock. I was just going to say that. So let's all clap into our first responders and delivery men and postal workers and everybody else that's keeping the city running for us. So Senator, we do have some questions for you. The first one's coming from Megan Joy.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. So, I mean, instead of this cancel rent policy,
Yeah.
can we not make the PPP or loan more flexible on the percentage that we could use for rent? Because, I mean, I think if we had more flexibility when we received that loan, we wouldn't have to not pay the landlords their rent. We could pay them, you know, a percentage of their rent. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 75%. But the way it's structured now, it's 25% of a small loan. And unless, you know what those terms are. So I just want to advocate for, one, moving the deadline for the PPP to the end of the year, and two, having greater flexibility on the amount that we can spend on rent versus payroll. Maybe it's 50-50.
You know, that's a great point.
Yeah.
I raised that issue, and Congressman Maloney and I have been talking about that, particularly for small businesses and our restaurants. I know she's looking into it. You know, we also, this is a food chain, right? We're talking about, not just tenants, but, we're talking about businesses, small landlords, banks, financial institutions. It goes all the way up the ladder or down the ladder, depending on how you look at this. And so you're absolutely right. We have to do something. So this is the time for idea generation. And so I appreciate your comments, and any suggestions we will accept. I've been appointed to the Revenue Raising Committee for the State Senate, where we're going to look at ideas to, the governor's proposing $10 billion worth of cuts in the absence of any aid from the feds. So we got to figure out what we're going to do. Obviously, we have to tax the wealthiest, but we got to think of creative solutions, like who's making money during this pandemic. That's what we need to focus on, because a lot of us are not, and a lot of us should not be paying any more in taxes. So it is a very difficult problem, but I appreciate your comments.
Senator, our next and final question is coming from Kay Webster. Okay. Okay, are you there?
Yep. Hi. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. Hi, Senator. Thank you for all the work up there. There were two bills that were voted on that I thought were particularly problematic, regardless of your opinion on them, because there were no watchdog groups who could be there in attendance to give testimony or to bring a differing opinion. So I wanted your thoughts on that. I'll say the two. One gave immunity to hospital and nursing homes owners, not just the staff. And there was some point to some of that, but essentially it's pretty hard to prove negligence as it is, and that really jeopardized and does jeopardize future lawsuits, et cetera. And the other one allowed for commercial surrogacy when we have altruistic surrogacy already, which threatens the life potentially and health of financially insecure women, while enabling the purchasing class to access, bodies for their private needs. And you and I have discussed this, and,
yes.
Any child who's here belongs is good. But this, I think, really opens the door for a very different industry with which does not have altruism as its goal. So thoughts on that? Thank you.
Sure. No, I really, Kathleen, I really, we have spoken about it. On the latter issue, surrogacy, I have 2 children through surrogacy. I would argue, this is my position, that the door is already open. It's open in 47 states. So what New York has done is close the door to the extent that women who are disadvantaged have been exploited. We now require a whole host of protections for women who want to act as surrogates, including their own medical care, health insurance, life insurance, independent legal counsel, ensuring that they have counseling, make sure that they have every medical decision is made by themselves, including whether to carry a child through term or not. So I believe we're raising the standard for surrogacy because so many states in this country, and frankly the world, have no laws whatsoever. And that's where women and parents who are well-intentioned and egg donors get taken advantage of. So, I'm happy to share more information about that bill. I think it gives some couples, individuals, LGBTQ people struggling with infertility, cancer survivors, some hope. And God knows we need a little bit of hope during this time. So the bill will not go into effect until next year, and certainly won't go into effect until all these restrictions are lifted. So I would be happy to talk to you about the bill if you have suggestions for it. There's opportunities for the Department of Health to impose new regulations and make it the best, most stringent, most protective bill in the country. In terms of your first question regarding the issue of medical liability, I share your concerns about that. I'm the chair of the Judiciary Committee. I carry the legislation that would finally allow New York to enter the world of wrongful death, where individuals who can prove that a loved one has been killed due to some negligence on the part of a physician or hospital can sue for beyond just the actual monetary damages, but pain and suffering, which has limited the recovery for so many people, particularly women, people of color, and people who are low income, because the estimate of your worth is based on how much you are able to earn according to a formula. And if you're a baby, or if you're somebody who works in construction, they will limit your family's recovery based on the fact that you are not viewed as equal to, say, a investment banker who's earning a hell of a lot more. So it's an issue that we need to follow closely. I hope I can pass wrongful death. I think it'll be important as part of this larger concept.
I guess my original question really had to do with, regardless of where you sit on the surrogacy issue, it was done without watchdog groups. And there was really no reason for it to happen at this point in time during a pandemic. So that's my objection, just on the face of it. And there probably, we don't need to take up more time here, but I would say in terms of the nursing home issues that really what we need are stronger standards and Public Health and Health Planning Council that has a half consumer representatives instead of one, who was just named after years of waiting.
Yeah.
And some managers are going 3, but I'd say.
This will be my final point. My legislation with Assemblymember Godfrey to add consumer representation, additional consumer representation to the Public Policy and Health Planning Board has passed again. The governor vetoed it last year. We hope to get it passed. And I will say that I had a public hearing on surrogacy. The Assembly had one, and we had multiple forums, but let's talk more about the issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to move on now to Councilmember Carlina Rivera.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to see you. It's always good to get together, even virtually. So I'm going to cover a few things that I'm just going to be very honest that Susan Stetzer told me to make sure that we have a couple minutes for questions, since I do have to skate in a few. So I guess to just give you a very brief catch up is that the city council met for the first time in weeks virtually. We had a virtual stated. We passed a number of land use applications related to preserving affordable housing, including a former squat building on 7th Street and buildings within the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association portfolio. We also introduced a package of COVID-19 related relief bills, about 11 bills in the package, everything from New York City Essential Workers Bill of Rights in terms of premiums, just cause, paid sick leave for gig workers, resolution on misclassification, to protecting New York City renters, extending time for all New York City renters to repay rent, blocking evictions, and the collection of debts. And that would be essentially delaying evictions until April 2021. Protecting tenants from harassment, prioritizing our public health in terms of providing safe shelter. This would provide rooms to our homeless New Yorkers. One of my bills to mandate that we open streets to promote safe social distancing, and then protecting New Yorkers' small businesses, commercial tenant harassment, my bill, which is suspending personal liability on commercial leases, and then suspending sidewalk cafe fees. So again, we're trying to do what we can, considering, I guess, our power and our jurisdiction. We can't regulate the rent, but we can certainly try to figure out how to provide some relief for New Yorkers who, you know, in the last few weeks, I've seen all kinds of, just really the spectrum from people that have a lot to people that really have basically nothing. And families are just struggling with food security and trying to figure out how to pay the rent, which is due in 3 days. And it has been really troubling just to see how hard it is for so many families. And I know that this is an unprecedented time and we're trying to move as quickly as possible. And we're pressuring the mayor and we're pressuring the governor. A lot of decisions made by the mayor's office is happening in somewhat of a vacuum. There was a very large announcement for task forces to address how we can recover, and of course, what the relief has been like for different populations. And we were not included at all in the creation of those task forces. I think time would be better spent, you know, with one commission that can kind of look at the response overall and have those people be appointed. I know the city council does not have the capacity to do that right now, as I have hundreds of cases in my office. We're coordinating a large network along with other elected officials who are on this call to deliver meals and pharmacy runs and to take care of each other. So it has been very, very challenging, but I think the first virtual stated went off as well as it could. And I know that some of you have participated in some of the hearings that we've held. Transportation, general welfare. Today we had housing and buildings to look at that rent bill that I mentioned. And tomorrow we will have a small business hearing on the legislation that I also mentioned. So just to cover the list in terms of hospitals, what can I say? For those of you who know the public health care system, it is the system that is serving the most vulnerable, the sickest, the poorest, are immigrant and undocumented, and they have been carrying so much water through this that the one system description that we're getting from the governor's office is really more in theory than practice. There has not been a seamless coordination between the private hospitals and the Elmhurst, Lincolns, and Woodhulls of the world. And unfortunately, as Health and Hospitals is asking for monetary donations, our voluntary hospital system, who is very, very well connected, has been able to tap into rich donors and other individuals to figure things out. So it is really the have and have nots. And I think that those disparities have not only been brought to light in terms of what we already know, that food, housing, healthcare, and education, which are basic human rights, especially in this city, are not accessible to everyone, but that we also see that in the fatality numbers, which have been absolutely heartbreaking. So in terms of the budget and how we're going to recover, we've been served about $7 billion in cuts from the mayor's office. That's $2 billion in this fiscal year, and about $5 with more coming, $5 billion and more on the way in fiscal year 2021. A lot of our nonprofits received kind of a pretty troubling letter saying that any services provided after March 22nd would have to be deemed essential for them to be paid in discretionary funding. Clearly, we're fighting to make sure that those that are providing essential services receive every penny that they are owed, since historically we have not been so good at paying those contracts out on time, and that's very, very unfair. I could say that coming from a former small nonprofit. And making sure that we're saving things like the summer youth employment program. When our pools are going to be closed, we don't know about what's going to happen in our parks and our beaches, and our young people need something to do. These are typically, you know, low-income individuals from Black and brown communities, and this is certainly one of my priorities on top of everything else. I guess I should take some questions. Susan had asked me for the cuts to the parks budget. Is that something that somebody wanted? Okay.
Yeah, so Carlina, just before we get into the questions, just a couple of things. So just a reminder, during the elected reports, questions can only come from board members. So I know that there's a couple of people who are in the attendee list that have their hands raised, so I'm not going to be able to call on you. To my fellow board members, I will say we have a load of hands raised for Carlina, and we're not going to get to all of you, and I'm going to prioritize people who have not asked questions yet. So we're going to start with Trevor, and I'm asking everyone to please keep their questions as brief as possible so that we can try to get to as many as possible. Trevor, go ahead.
Hi, Carlina, thank you for everything you're doing. I'm going to leave the parks question for probably someone else. I just want to ask a question on the street closures. Understanding that it was needed, and the city's pushing through a lot of initiatives, but how is the community going to be able to participate or recommend which streets they think should be closed or turned into open streets? You mentioned the task forces, and a lot of these decisions seem to be made fairly quickly and without public input. So how is the public going to have input on those street closures?
Well, you know, our bill, which we introduced and had a hearing for in the same week, we then heard from the mayor, which the Department of Transportation and NYPD had pretty much testified in opposition of this bill. Now they're kind of on board, and I think we can use this Open Streets program so creatively in terms of even saving some of our restaurants, but it's really for promoting social distancing. How can you be involved? Well, one is in terms of the task force. I thought it was pretty interesting that the mayor's numerous task forces, that transportation was not one of them. But in order for everyone to be involved, we truly do want to make this a community-led process. I know the mayor kind of did his big announcement, and many people think that we might not go through with the bill, but until we see a real plan from the mayor, not just an allocation of how many miles are going to be determined by the NYPD, we're going to keep going forward, because we do want it to be community driven, to work with the business improvement districts, to work with civic and block associations, the community board. There actually is an allocation of miles that is specifically supposed to be determined by the community board, but I don't think we should piecemeal it. I think it should be comprehensive and as holistic as possible, considering what we're talking about. I have already received recommendations from community members, from other elected officials, and certainly from community groups. So I would say send those recommendations to me, but how we can do it, we're kind of still figuring out the process to make sure that people do feel included, because you all know your communities best. And that's what happens when you're kind of, you know, trying to operate in the midst of a pandemic. It's kind of been like on a rolling basis. So the short answer is we will take recommendations, and we'll also try to be a little bit more forthcoming when we have them on details as to how everyone can be involved.
Thank you, council members. I know you have another town hall to get to, so we're going to do one more last question from you, from Valentina Jones. Okay. What I will say for the rest of the board members that want to ask questions, what we can do is, if you want to type your questions into the chat box and make sure to specify who they're for, when I download the transcript tomorrow from the chat box, I will highlight the questions that are for the certain elected officials and send them to the elected officials.
Great.
Okay, here's the question. In terms of the people that are working, whenever I hear these presentations, it's like everything is okay in the hospital. And then when I talk to people that are working, it is like the total opposite. So my question is, who is going to talk to the workers with just a variety of issues that like I said, whenever I hear most officials talk and people from the hospital sector, it's like everything is okay and everybody has everything. And then when you talk to the workers, it is the total opposite. I get a call this morning from somebody crying about the situation in the hospital, and I'm not even working anymore. So anyway, in terms of the workers, who are going to talk to the workers to get the actual frontline story? Because I think that's what we're not hearing, is the actual people that are out there working and what their situation is like and what their concerns are, especially because rules have basically changed for this particular epidemic, and they know that they've changed.
No,
and that's my question, is who's going to talk to the workers?
Well, by the way, we talk to them all the time, and we flag numerous issues to executives. We're also working to make sure that we'll protect whistleblowers, because that is how a lot of the information got out to the public and to the world as to the conditions that were going on in some of our hospitals. I mean, look at Elmhurst alone. What went down in Elmhurst Hospital and how that news got out through people who were working inside. We certainly want to protect the workers. We talk to them all the time. Doctors, nurses, OBGYNs, doulas, midwives, they all actually do email or text or somehow get in touch with me. And we have daily check-in calls with hospital teams, whether they're intergovernmental and even executives. I know that many of us don't trust some of the executives at some of these larger hospitals. So that's why we make sure that we have the relationships for the people that are actually on the front line. You've seen tons of exposés and really, really damaging articles in some of these systems on what people are going through. We saw trash bags as surgical gowns and people in these conditions without masks. Nothing is perfect right now. And really there are a lot of situations where I don't feel like there is substantial PPE. You might hear the words adequate, but we never did get a definition of what adequate meant and which guidelines we were using to judge them. So just so you know, if you have anything that you want to flag, please let us know. We're always looking for information as to how to improve a system, or quite frankly, if we have to shame them if they are not doing what they're supposed to do. I think what's going to be the hardest, one of the hardest things that we haven't quite had to grapple with, well, two things. One is how many healthcare workers we will find out ultimately died during this pandemic. And two, the mental trauma that we are all going through that we have not quite yet processed, that the nurses and doctors who were previously doing surgery or they were in pediatrics, seeing, you know, dozens of people die every night. And in addition to the teachers and the students and the families and everyone else who are in homes where there's domestic violence, there needs to be a mental health program implemented that includes art therapy, to include our cultural institutions, to really address some of these issues. Short answer, Valentina, let me know what you hear. I'm always interested. I am always checking with workers as well as people like a Dr. Katz. And I want to make sure that people feel safe when they're inside what we deem as one of the safest places in New York City, which is a hospital.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Tell them that they can contact you and it won't be discussed, because you'd be surprised. I think a lot of hospitals have policies that everybody has to sign off on about how they communicate outside of that hospital.
And you're right. And Dr. Katz from Health and Hospitals said that he does not have that policy. I asked them directly that they are allowed to talk to whoever they want, but let's be clear, I'm sure there are some sort of, you know, hints as to, oh, just let us know, we'll take care of it. Again, we want to protect whistleblowers. They're doing the right thing and letting people know of the conditions. And it is because of them that many of the terrible conditions that existed in some of our systems early on were eventually rectified. So thank you. Let me know. And thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Good luck on your town hall tonight.
Oh, thanks. Join us if you can. Well, you're doing the people's work, so thank you.
I'll be here till 10. And Councilmember Margaret Chin.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone, and I hope that everyone is healthy and safe. I'm on the iPhone because my iPad and my computer it's not working. I think I used it too much today from morning, straight through, because we had a hearing today, as my colleague Karina was talking about, housing and building meeting. We're starting to have hearings about some of the package of bill that she talked about earlier. I really want to focus on our senior population, because I know that my office has been getting a lot of calls from our seniors. In the beginning of the shutdown, people were supposed to be getting, home delivered meal from the senior centers, and that was going well for a while. And then all of a sudden, it was taken away from the Department for the Aging and got centralized under the food SAR. And there's still a lot of problem of people getting food. They were always told to call 311, it's long wait. And there's grab and go, from the school. It's helpful, but they still got to work out a lot of the kinks. But one of the things that we want to focus on is that we want to make sure that coming out of this crisis, that our senior center are kept whole, because they are so crucial in our community. Because right now, they don't really have any part in it. They are calling out senior, doing wellness check, but I also want to make sure that they have the capacity going forward to really look at what the senior center should look like after this crisis. How do we use technology, and how do we make sure that the food quality that we have fought for, the ethnic food, the kosher food, the halal food, that is not going to be lost. So that is something that we want to make sure that in this budget, the 10 million that was promised for our senior center, it was not in the executive budget, and I was not happy with that. And we also want to make sure that the money for the home delivery meal program, which is really the only program that's continued to service our homebound senior beautifully. And we want to make sure that that program continue to grow, because the need will continue to grow. And as you heard from my colleague earlier, the budget cut is going to be, it's devastating. And that's why we need help from our federal government. And in some of the calls that we have with the congressional delegation and our congressional leader, they were trying to help, fight for money for the city and the state. It did not happen in this 3.5. It has to happen in the next one, because otherwise New York City, the whole could be up to $8 billion. And we're gonna lose a lot of the safety net program that we fought so hard for. The other one is our youth program. There's no way that we could just get rid of the summer youth program. And we're working with provider to figure out a creative way of providing services to our youth during the summer. The mayor has set up, all these specialized task force, did not involve the council. So going forward, we will work with community board, neighborhood group to figure out after crisis, what would these programs look like, so that we make sure that our seniors, our youth, our homeless, our families in need are not lost. The other thing is that I know there's a lot of discussion about small businesses. And sadly, it's like our small business got left out. The big banks were not helping them. And by the time people applied, they ran out of money. Now they put in more money in this 3.5. And the good news is that from the discussion with Congresswoman Maloney, there's $60 billion set aside for women and minority-owned business, and also to allow smaller bank and credit union and community development fund to help small businesses. So I really urge the small businesses in our area to reach out to these support groups. AFI, Renaissance, they are CDFI, the Lower East Side Credit Union. We also have LaGuardia Community College, Small Business Center, and Pace University, Small Business Development Center. That could be helpful to help small businesses apply for these loans, and hopefully they will come out of this. And but we still got a lot of work to do. So I'm open to some questions.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was muted. Thank you, Councilmember Chen. We're going to go to Kay Webb first. Okay.
Yep. Hi, Margaret. Thank you.
Kay.
Hi. Thank you for all of that. I just wanted to hear any thoughts you have about the devastation that has happened in New York City nursing homes that, you know, as the governor and the and the industry blame each other for, you know, a decades-long problem. Is there any thought going forward of a task force or something that could really, with people who don't have skin in the game, who aren't making money off of this, who might be able to come up with a set of guidelines, requirements, demands, asks for nursing homes going forward? Because I think there are immediate things which are being done the best they can, but in the future, it looks like there were things that could have, would have gone better.
I definitely agree with you. Okay. My mom right now is in a skilled nursing facility at Gouverneur. And it's such a big difference between the city one and the private ones. And so we really have to figure out how to, you know, support nursing, you know, skilled nursing facility, because we're going to need a lot more of that. And that's why I think for the council, we have to take the lead on some of these issues that's not being addressed. Councilmember Traeger, myself, Councilmember Rivera, and then Councilmember Mark Levine, we also, you know, sent a letter to the governor and the mayor that they should really utilize, you know, the Javits Center Hospital to help, you know, nursing home resident who was infected, you know, with the virus or was recovering. So, you know, get them out of that situation. And it's like they're forgotten. So I think going forward, we also need to look at, well, how would these facilities and what are some of the creative models out there? So I really look forward to working with you on that.
All right, our next question is coming from Olympia Kazi.
So I just wrote it also, but sadly, I heard from a dear friend who lost someone who was living in a nursing home that he has something to report because he heard from other person there what was happening. Where should we be directing this kind of reports when we know that, you know, something horrible is happening?
Definitely reach out to us because a lot of the council member, like Councilmember Traeger, Councilmember Cosgood, called around to some of the nursing home, and some we were able to get respond, and some didn't pick up the phone. So I think we need to really push for more oversight from the state because they are under state jurisdiction. So we need to work with our state elected and the governor. I mean, they cannot abandon our frail seniors. I mean, those are the most vulnerable seniors. So the more cases that we hear, we will definitely continue to advocate.
Thank you, Councilmember. Val, if you want to ask a quick question, we have about a minute left.
There's two things. One, in terms of nursing homes, I haven't worked in one in ages, but one of the things I always remember was that their patient-nurse ratio was terrible. And so that to me is like one of the issues to look at. What is the nurse-patient ratio? I mean, because hospitals are having a hard time with that. The other thing I think to look at in terms of seniors out here is computer literacy. Yeah. Because I think what I've heard from almost everybody that's a senior citizen is the whole concept that when we go back to whatever is going to be the new normal, it's going to be as minimal person-to-person contact as possible. And most seniors did not grow up computer literate and are very, very uncomfortable. So hopefully one of the things that will happen will be more computer literacy and help for seniors in terms of dealing with various aspects of our lives where we have no choice but to go paperless and go computer.
No, I agree with you, Val. I mean, I think that's something that Department of Aging was working on, and I will make sure that we fight for the funding for that because we cannot just say, oh, you know, no new needs. So we will definitely continue to do that. The other thing is that that's how the senior is going to be connected. because going forward, they will not be able to gather 200-300 senior in one big room with a congregate meal. So going forward, we have to figure out, like, how do we keep senior in touch? And I know that, you know, we have a lot of computer programs for our senior in the senior center. We just got to get everybody involved. And with nursing home, I think we have to work to really elevate home health aides, nurses aid. They are the caregiver, and we got to make sure they get paid better, that they are treated with respect. And so that, because they are so critically needed. But if we don't even pay the minimum wage, how do we attract more people to go into that field? So that's something going forward, we have to make sure that we fight to make sure that they are taken care of.
Yeah, and that the nurse-patient ratio is better.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where half of these problems come from, is that the nurse is terrible. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for the back and forth, Val. I'm sorry. You had your question answered, so we're going to move on. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Chin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe and healthy. All right. See you soon.
So we have next Deborah Glick, followed by Brian Kavanaugh, then Harvey Epstein, and Yuli New. So Assemblymember Glick.
I'm in contact, so this is really terrific. Just a reminder that the census, Manhattan is losing the battle of filling out the census. Our borough president told us the other day, Staten Island is beating Manhattan. That's terrible. We have to do more. While the state has said that it will send out an absentee ballot to everyone for the June 23rd primary, everybody should take available of the absentee ballot, but you can download it ahead of time. It's not like I don't trust the state and the Board of Elections to actually do that accurately, but I think that it would be good for you to download and get your application for an absentee ballot in before there is, quote, a rush, assuming that they actually get those that paperwork out to us. A few things that has come up in other conversations that I wanted to address. The state has included $25.5 million in summer youth funds, and I've written a letter to the mayor to say utilize these resources, especially before the governor doesn't send the check. And on we added $25 million in emergency food aid, which is going directly to food banks. So if there is a food bank locally that is not getting resources, we know that it is going, we're reviewing, we know that the governor has and the speaker have mentioned to us the larger food banks, Food NYC and Catholic Charities, but we want to make certain that the smaller food banks are also being able to access those resources. On nursing homes, yes, they've always been understaffed, and in many instances, workers are undertrained. So the nurse to patient or client definitely is an issue. We have raised a couple of specific nursing homes with the governor's office every afternoon. We have a conversation with the governor's staff it's essentially troubleshooting. We've raised a couple of specific nursing homes with them, and they have indicated that they're going to do a review of nursing homes, but I've signed on to a bill that Assemblymember Kim from Queens has put out that would essentially say that not only would there be oversight, but in an instance where there is a number of fatalities and confirmed infection, one, they would have to be clear about reporting that. And in the worst cases of negligence, the state should take it over. so that we do not have frail elderly people or disabled people at the mercy of a private nursing home operator that is making a decent living for themselves, but doing it by poor care to their clients. I have two bills that I've put out. One that would say for those, once where the courts are actually back in session, that people could get an additional postponement if they're over 70 until this pandemic is over or until there's a vaccine, because people do not want to congregate. I would urge everybody to also use their absentee ballot. That's, I know some people are upset about the loss of a Senator Sanders, Joe Biden primary, but those primaries bring out an enormous amount of people. And we don't want to be Wisconsin, where people were forced to vote in person and had these long lines and some people got sick. So there are down ballot races. Sometimes having a larger number of people vote is a good thing, but not when we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We also have a bill that would require all employers to maintain PPE for all of their employees, a month's supply. Now, right now, it's hard to acquire that, but as things get better, we want those materials are available. We want every employer. We saw people working in supermarkets without masks, without gloves, and have no access to it. Unacceptable. We know even if there's a dip, that we will have a resurgence. And until there is a vaccine on this particular pathogen, we aren't safe. So that's number one. Number two, we also know that this won't be the last time that we have some infectious disease for which we have little or no immunity. So that's important. I also just want to say that the senior centers, it's very important for them, as Margaret said, for them to survive. But they were doing a great job on food distribution until the city stepped in and screwed it up. So sometimes, we should all do no harm. That's what medical professionals are supposed to do. And maybe government could take a cue from that. So some of our senior centers on the QT are helping us because the city doesn't have it together on that. On the streets, I think it's good to have in your neighborhood a safety valve, someplace where we'll be able to get out onto the streets, especially as the weather gets warmer and where there is area. Downtown doesn't have enough parks. I mean, we're not like where I grew up in Queens, huge, big parks, where the governor grew up. We had big parks. We don't have that in Manhattan. So we need to have some of these streets, but I want to remind people, go out with a mask. Wear a mask for the foreseeable future. This is a nasty thing. And we don't know if asymptomatic people, whether they're carriers, how long they're carriers. We don't know if people who've recovered are still infectious. We know nothing. So protect yourself. Your health is irreplaceable. And I will just...
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've got about 3 minutes left if you wanted to leave time.
Hey, I will just close by saying that we heard from the governor's folks that they might entertain yet an extension on the moratorium of evictions. We're going to push for that, and we're going to push them to allow us to use security deposits for rent. That's a way of actually getting money, not out of someone's pocket, but into the hands of some of the smaller landlords that really, they too are struggling. Thank you. If there's a question.
Question from Dominic Berg.
Hi, thanks for everything that you're doing. And so I just want to bring up, because I understand you're the chair of the Higher Education Committee, and I had a conversation with Assemblymember Epstein about this as well. So testing Standardized tests are, there's a lot of inequity in them as it is. Personally, I have 2 juniors who are very anxious about this. And I have one of my children actually needs accommodations and is not able to take the test at the regular time that all other students are able to take it. Right now, we're looking at the fact that she's probably going to have to really have a high stakes test in late September. And so I'm wondering if SUNY is discussing, or if you can raise it with SUNY, just like you see schools and a lot of other schools that are dropping the requirement for ACT and SATs for the upcoming admissions.
Yeah, I think that I will make a note. You should also call the office 212-774-5153 so we can work directly with you on any accommodation if in fact tests are actually going to take place. And the colleges really don't know what they're going to do about online learning. I talked to the CUNY chancellor today, thinking about hybrid classes, some online and some in a classroom. They're concerned about density. It's a work in progress, but I do know that some of the schools are dumping that. I don't know that they have come to a conclusion. Some of the boards are meeting in this next week to figure out what they're doing going forward. I will raise that both with SUNY and CUNY and with KICU, which is the operating, which is sort of the lobbying arm for the private colleges.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Got one last question from Robin Chattel.
Hi, Deborah, thanks again for all the work you're doing. I wanted to touch upon what you had said about food distribution and how the city's taken over that from the community centers. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if it's that black and white, or is there a collaboration? And if it's not working so well, is there a way to wrestle that back? And if so, what can the general public do to make that happen?
Well, I actually think DOE has been doing a decent job with the grab and go. And they said that is going to continue through the summer. So that's a good thing. What we are working with the city, they don't listen to us because they, we're just state reps, but we're working with some individual senior centers that are still providing meals on their own. And the city is struggling. I mean, we go on these calls and, they tell us what they're doing, and it's like the hospitals. Everything is great. They're working. There's been a couple of hiccups, but the reality is that the hiccups are pretty damn big and people have been left without. So we focused on the seniors because most of them can't go out and shouldn't go out. Community groups, food banks are doing a great job, even though they're very stressed. So I call the office 212-674-5153 if there's a community center that is having food distribution trouble that we can work through with the city. But it's the seniors we've been focusing on because they literally should not be going out.
Thank you, Assembly Member. We're going to move on now to State Senator Brian Kavanaugh. Senator, are you there?
He's actually trying to get on now.
Okay, so we're going to skip him then and go to the next person. Harvey Epstein, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. You guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. So I know you have our report. I'll just kind of briefly talk about things that we haven't touched on. I know Deborah mentioned, I think Brad mentioned the issue of the primary. Deborah mentioned the primary too. Obviously, the primary on June 23rd is not canceled. The presidential primary was canceled, and I was disappointed by that, and I voted against the provision in the budget. But that's what we agreed to in the budget. The other thing that we should be thinking about is the state budget itself. Carlene talked a lot about the city budget and the state budget's impact. If the governor's cuts that he's proposed going forward, we're going to see serious additional cuts in the city budget. The additional $8.2 billion could reflect all the localities. And unfortunately, in our budget that the state passed, we gave the governor the authority to do quarterly adjustments for the budget. And, I think it's troubling that we gave up that authority, but as we move forward, it's just the reality we are in this year. So we could see rolling cuts every quarter over the fiscal year. So something to keep your eye out for. I know we're all doing coronavirus response, and we've heard a lot from Brad and Deborah and Carlene about what we're all trying to do. Clearly, the issues of SUNY and CUNY, as that Deborah mentioned, are severe, and I think they've taken some leadership. CUNY's done a great job, especially with students who can do, credit, no credit. SUNY has a much more like campus by campus program, but if you have problems or you hear students are having problems about that, you should let us know. On the eviction moratorium, obviously Brad and I have a bill around eviction moratoriums disasters, and Eulene's leading on the bill around cancel rent. We have a couple other provisions around terminating people's leases if they need to in the middle of this, getting a rent freeze from the Rent Guidelines Board instead of having Rent Guidelines Board hearings. We know that everyone's suffering and they don't really need to have hearings to say whether they should have raised the rent. There should be at least a rent freeze over the next year while everyone hopefully is able to recover. We've heard a lot from folks around prescription medication, and we're trying to, during the pandemic, to allow coverage for 120 days so people aren't freaked about getting their medication. And small business issues are just, every day we're all seeing them. Carlene mentioned some of the stuff on the state level, the city level. We have a bunch of bills that we're moving forward on the state level as well. If you can, if there are things that you hear, the things you want to work on, we're happy to coordinate. Volunteers are always necessary to help with either food distribution, calling constituents, calling assistants, getting flyer information up in the neighborhood. Crisis that we're hearing about unemployment. If you hear people having concerns about getting unemployment benefits, our officers are having daily conversations with the governor's office, and we can get you that information. And if there, every week there's events we're doing. I'm doing a town hall along with Deborah Glick tomorrow night around, with Young Invincibles on CUNY, SUNY issues. I'm doing one next week around small businesses. I think we're all trying to catch as many people as we possibly can on these issues. It's a crisis that's not going to be abated anytime soon, but we're all rowing together. I think we are lucky to have such great colleagues on the East Side, both the Assembly and the Senate and the Council. I'm lucky to be able to work with them. And if we think we can get something done, we can figure it out together. Earlier today, yesterday or 2 days ago, the governor's office dropped a lot of hand sanitizer up at NYCHA developments in our neighborhood. But these are 10-gallon jugs that we need to get. We're all creatively thinking about how we get it out to people. We're all creatively thinking how we get food out to people. And we have a strong nonprofit, goals of doing fabulous job. Henry Street, Vision Urbana, Grand Street. They're all doing as much as they can in this crisis. And all we can do is ask for patience and hope that together we can make this all work. Nothing's going to change overnight. We're not going to see, as we slowly come out of this, New York's not going to be the same. And the question is how we're going to be able to keep as much as we can and ensure that we have real budget justice. We're really focusing on that in Albany, and it isn't just about cuts, it's about how we can bring new revenue. There's a lot of bills that we all have around new revenue, whether it's taxing, the high income earners more, the mezzanine debt bill. There's lots of legislation to talk about having resources at the table, because the answer can't just be cuts. It's got to be cuts, but it's also got to be we who are doing really well need to put more on the table. And that's 112 billionaires in New York and tens of thousands of millionaires who live here who've gotten real bonuses from the federal government, from the tax cuts from Trump. Even in the stimulus package, billionaires got money back. So we need to take some of that back from them. And what are they going to experience with a 1 or 2% increase? They won't even notice. And this is billions of dollars for our budget that we need to get back. So hopefully you all support the idea of taxing people who have more income so we all don't suffer. And I'm happy to take a question if you have any.
Yeah, we do got a couple for you, Assembly Member. We've got first Michael Perlis.
Hi, Assembly Member. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. I just had a question on the rent freeze. From what I understand, it's only for rent stabilized apartments, right? Because it's through the RGB, and the term they're voting on is from October 1st, 2020 to for the next year. So is there any, if that's true, then is there anything we can do about leases that are renewed between now and October 1st, where they still have the 1.5% and 2.5% increase?
So there are a couple things that's a very good question. And it's true, the rent freeze, the legislation I've introduced is just for rent regulated apartments. We also have another bill that Assemblywoman Hunter and Senator Salazar has introduced around good cause eviction. And that would cover all the non-regulated units. So that's really important for the non-regulated stock. What we really need to do is go back to Albany and get those bills passed. The second thing is, and we've all been asking, I've sent a letter to the governor's office now, probably a month ago. He has the authority under his executive power to freeze all the rents now. And we've told him to do it. There's no reason to wait. Legislatively, we can't do it unless through the guidelines or doing it through the structures that we have, but he has the authority today to do it. We've asked him, some people want to be able to use their security deposit. He has the authority to let tenants do that now, even if landlords don't agree. He's got the authority to do the things we care about. Some people might question cancel rent. I think it's legal, especially since we're putting a hardship fund together for those difficult landlords. But he's got a lot of power today, and he should be exercising it instead of doing cuts, helping regular people.
Our next question is coming from Jackie Wong. Jackie, go ahead. Jackie?
Maybe not.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So Senator, in terms of generating new revenues, I just want to make a small suggestions. Maybe you could consider taxing foreigners who owns unoccupied luxury condos in New York. I think that as proposals had made in the past, but I don't think it has any legislation. So maybe this is a good timing to bring it.
Well, luckily, Assemblywoman Glick is here on this call as well. She's got a pied-à-terre tax that I'm a co-sponsor of, and that's exactly what you're talking about. Those high-end real estate developments that they need resources from. Deborah's been leading that charge now for a few years. We are trying to get it in the budget this year, and unfortunately it didn't happen. And I know that she will continue to fight for her pied-à-terre tax, and she knows I'll be right by her side as that moves forward. We want to make sure the people who are high income earners, people who are not New York residents, pay additional. They're not paying they're not paying income tax. They should pay more for their real estate.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
So I don't know if Deborah wants to add anything to that, but.
Well, we have one last question for you from Megan Joy.
Hi, thanks for all your work. Just instead of focusing on, regarding commercial rents, instead of focusing on canceling rents, which I think would require some sort of federal backstop of money or some sort of real estate tax concession, can we put the power in the hands of the actual commercial tenants and, make some of these, I know you're not SBA, but if we're able to pay the rent and give us the funds to pay the rent, then the power is with us, whether it's giving us more freedom in the PPP loans or maybe it's, our portion of real estate taxes gets cut, whatever it is. But, we understand that we understand that the landlords are small businesses as well, and they need to get their rents as well. We just want the ability to pay the rents and have some money to do that. The loans from the federal government aren't allowing us to do that right now, not enough.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, New York State, we were pushing New York State to have a loan program as well. But the governor, as you know, we don't have money in New York State. I have a bill to allow commercial tenants to basically create like a scree type program for the small commercial businesses to say, if the landlord forgives a portion of the rent, that can be as a real estate reduction of real estate taxes. That's an idea we've been pushing. And the other idea that we're pushing is to say, if we can't get it canceled, can we make sure it can be collected, but it can't be subject to an eviction? So making sure that then maybe the commercial tenant might have to pay. Hopefully they will be able to figure something else out, but making sure that that cost doesn't result in eviction. So it might be a judgment, but at least the people can keep their businesses. I'll just talk about two other things, Megan, that we've talked about. We've heard a lot from small businesses that the value, and especially in a bars and restaurants, is a liquor license. And if the landlord couldn't get a new business in that location to also get a liquor license, they would give bargaining power to that small business that's already there. And so to say, to limit the number of liquor licenses in existing locations for new businesses could give additional bargaining power to those small businesses. I think the idea of having more loans available from the state government would be great. I just don't see it coming because the governor's not really interested in moving that thing forward at all. And I hear you're concerned about the canceling the rent. That's why we're trying to make sure there's a fund available. And that's why we've also asked the federal government to have funds that I signed on with, I think, probably 200 of my colleagues to ask for federal money to pay the rent for those both residential and commercial businesses.
Yeah, there's already a 6-month backlog at SLA, so I don't think I would worry about them getting a liquor license in a hurry.
Right. But it's all about getting additional bargaining power for small businesses. That's what we're trying to do, to give them as much leverage as they can to negotiate with their landlord so they can stay.
Thank you, Assembly Member. We appreciate it. We're going to go back now to State Senator Kavanaugh. Senator, are you with us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So I know you've heard from a lot of us, and we are all working very closely together as we should be. So there's a lot of overlap in the work we're doing. And I've heard some of my, Greer from my staff has been there the whole time. And so I understand you've heard quite a bit about, unemployment and food and many other issues. We're working collaboratively with all of them and with LES Ready on those things. And I guess not focus too much on that work right now, but just to say, so I'm the chair of the Senate Housing Committee, and I've been particularly focused on the housing questions. And I know you've heard some about that, particularly just from Harvey just now. But we are pushing for a comprehensive program that really is intended to do what Harvey was just talking about, which is actually get federal funding and pay rent to the extent that residential tenants have an inability to pay. So it would be kind of loosely modeled on Section 8, but it would cover rents that are much higher than governmental programs typically cover. We go up to 250% of what's called fair market rent, which in New York City would cover rents potentially up to around $4,800, depending on the number of bedrooms. And it would it'd be available to people who have lost income or jobs, probably have a range of criteria that would allow people to qualify. And the goal would be, since this is emergency, to create a relatively smooth process for people to get that assistance. And again, I think that, our idea is to do it as a piece of state legislation that would design a program and work out the kinks so that to the extent there's federal money available, we can move as soon as possible. We are looking at the CARES Act did have some housing money. We're looking at how much of that may be available for rental assistance, but we know there's going to be a need for a lot more. So as Harvey noted, about 200 of us, legislators and other government officials, as well as lots of advocates, have called for basically $100 billion national figure with $10 billion of it going for New York. And that was addressed to our New York congressional delegation and our 2 senators. And some of them have responded favorably and have actually put in writing their desire to try to make sure that is funded in the next stimulus. So we're working on that, and I would urge people who are concerned. I think that there are a lot of ideas out there, but I think the surest route to addressing that would be to get a real infusion of federal money. And, in a world where the federal government has so far allocated $2.7 trillion with a T, getting $100 billion nationally for housing, which is obviously essential, particularly at this time, and $10 billion to New York doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask. So again, we're working out the details of that program and working jointly with the Assembly and having conversations with the state executive branch as well. For homeowners, we have a proposal. As I'm sure all of you know, there is a forbearance in place that basically prevents banks, lenders from collecting mortgage if you miss payments during the period. We would like to. We have a bill that we're working on with, again, there's a federal and a state component to this. The state level, we believe we can regulate state chartered banks and some institutions that service mortgages in New York that are New York regulated. And what we would do is basically say that for the duration of the forbearance, however much payments accrue during that period would be required to be put at the end of the mortgage. So if you have 3 months of forbearance now because you can't pay for 3 months, and your mortgage ends in January of 2020, it would now end in April of 2020. And we think that is with no penalty and interest added. We think effectively that would make it such that your mortgage doesn't really exist during the forbearance period, as opposed to the current situation, which is really a temporary fix, which basically as the law stands now, all of those payments will become due as soon as the forbearance period ends. So, and we think that a lot of people are gonna have trouble paying that. I know you've heard a lot from a lot of your electeds tonight, so I think maybe I will stop there, but I'm happy to take questions or comments or concerns about any of this.
Thank you, Senator. We've got a couple of questions for you. The first, Michelle Cooper-Smith.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for all your hard work on this. What I'm wondering about is the existing funds that have already been allocated through the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. I think it's like $8.7 billion. And I've heard the governor saying that, and also Governor Murphy saying that the states won't necessarily use it. I'm wondering if there have been any discussions about creative ways to use that for incurred costs or what the policy issues are with not being able to use it.
I didn't hear the last part of your question. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh, just I know that money has already been allocated through the CARES Act to the states, but right. I've heard that the governors are saying, and a lot of senators also saying we can't actually use this money because of all the restrictions that have been placed on it, including through the new Treasury guidelines. So I'm wondering if you know how the state might potentially use that money, or if there are creative ways to do it, and if there are any machinations going on to rectify that in the future.
Yeah, honestly, there is a widespread expectation that Congress will be back at this, the effort of providing relief through stimulus bills that are going to cost additional money. So I think one option is, to the extent that they are going back to the drawing board, it's probably easier for them to modify the terms of some of the things they've done already than it is to, come up with additional money, although additional money is very much needed. So I think that we have been, on various issues, we have been pushing federal executive agencies to interpret things in a way, and broadly in a way, to construe things that have been done to allow whatever waivers they can provide for obstacles. And this is across all different programs. There was some of this money had constraints that were, this was a very complicated set of legislation that was put together. So there are constraints that I think probably people didn't fully appreciate how difficult it would be for people to draw down the money. So I think to some extent we can ask Congress, we can ask the executive branch through its discretion to change the terms of some of these things, and we can also ask Congress to go back to the drawing board and modify these programs to the extent they're not working as they seem to have been intended to be. And again, in addition, they should be putting more money in the pot for small business, and I would say especially for housing, as well as for fiscal relief for states and city governments, so that they can continue to provide basic services, because the state budget situation and the city budget situation are really pretty desperate. And so also offering open-ended stimulus package, like fiscal stability, would be very helpful.
Thank you, Senator. We have another question from Michael Perlis.
Hi, Senator.
Hi.
So I'm wondering how the voucher system would work with people who are roommates or people who aren't on a lease or people who are undocumented, or just people who can't prove that their income was lost one way or another. And then also, I'm wondering if there's any other bills that could be potentially introduced, because like you said, the mortgage would basically not exist for homeowners, but renters, even with this voucher program, would still have to pay 30% of their income towards rent. So, and then, you know, obviously there's been a huge wait list for Section 8, and it can be really hard for tenants and low-income people to jump through the hoops to get that. So I'm wondering if there are like pieces in the legislation, or I guess just how that would sort of fall into place.
So just on in terms of parity, it is true that, and we think that the homeowner provision is generous and will help a lot of people. It just should be noted that a mortgage is not the only housing expense of somebody who is a homeowner. So we're not covering all of the expenses related to owning a home, but we are making sure that the mortgage and foreclosure doesn't become a problem. We also did, I should note, we made sure there was $20 million in the state budget to provide advice and counsel through a program called the Homeowner Protection program, which has been around for a while and actually came out of the last mortgage crisis. So we are really making sure that people don't lose their homes as a result of the ability to pay their mortgage. There are obviously also a lot of efforts to make sure unemployment and other programs are providing cash to people for various expenses, including housing. With respect to tenants, the goal, we believe that the program let me take the two different, the categories you took differently. People who, like, the question of how you prove a loss of income. We would say that we're likely to, right now the bill says if you had a substantial loss of income and it's subject to rules that would be put in place by the agency administering the program, which is the state HCR. And we are probably going to expand that to specify that certain things would automatically qualify. If you qualified for unemployment, if you are certified as facing eviction, if you have had if you lost a job. And I would remind you that, well, not remind you, but just I would note that proving that you had a job and now you don't have a job is easier than a lot of the programs that normally you're trying to document very specifically. I had this amount of money and now I have that amount of money. If you had income, you were working, say, in a restaurant, and now that restaurant has been closed by the government, it's not too difficult to show that you were on the payroll of that restaurant. I mean, a letter from the restaurant saying, yes, this person was employed here and we had to lay them off should be sufficient. And there are programs that use that kind of documentation, sometimes in a sort of a adjudicatory process, but to where they're challenging a denial. But we think that demonstrating you've had a loss of income in this context may not be so hard. With respect to undocumented, the law is a little tricky there. There is a federal law that says you cannot use state or local resources to provide benefits to people who are undocumented unless the legislature expressly provides that that is the intent. And so the bill I have expressly provides that to the extent that state money could be used to cover the cost of this program with respect to undocumented immigrants, that they'd be fully eligible. We unfortunately don't get to set the eligibility for federal money. If the federal government grants the money in a manner that makes it available for undocumented, then we would certainly use it for that. And I think that this administration in Albany would use it for that. I think it's going to take a bit of a lobbying effort as we're lobbying for $10 billion, we should also be lobbying to make sure that it is available for our needs, which certainly include undocumented immigrants. And I am committed, and I've said this, I've had a lot of conversations with advocates around this issue. I am committed to making sure that undocumented immigrants and also roommates, our bill deals with a potential where two different roommates can be treated as separate households if they're really independent. Obviously, you don't want people who are roommates who are a long-term couple to just be able to announce that they're actually separate households in the same apartment. But yeah, it does have criteria to specify when people should be considered separate households, even though they're living in the same apartment. So it's intended to be generous and broad and relatively easy to qualify for, but we will be amending it as we get feedback from people who know how these programs play out to accomplish that.
Thank you, Senator. We don't have time for any more questions, so I'm just going to remind my fellow board members that if there's a question you wanted to ask and you didn't have time to just type it into the chat box, and we will move along to the elected representatives.
And if I can just one more quick plug, we're also having a town hall. It is Thursday. the details are available at nysenate.gov at our website, and it's going to be an hour on housing issues with some experts from legal aid, and another hour on business issues. And we have the commissioner of the city Small Business Services Department, as well as somebody from the PACE Small Business Assistant Program, PACE University. So it should be good. And again, it's a Zoomable event, and hope people can join.
Thank you, Senator. All right, we are going to move on to Assemblymember Yulene New, and then we are going to have our Borough President, Gail Brewer, who joined us recently.
Oh my God, I waited so long. I just wanted to say hello to everyone. Also, because I'm like the last on all of the different levels besides Gail, I didn't even know she signed on. I'm so excited. But I just wanted to say I have so many thoughts and so many things I typed into the chat already, but we cannot be losing the census battle against Staten Island. Okay, that's like silly and stupid. We have to win. We have to win. We have to get everybody to sign in. And then on top of that, so I want to, shout out to Deb Glick on that. And I also wanted to remind people that I'm having my town hall on Sunday. I know that it moved from Friday. It's a little confusing, and I apologize. My town hall is now on Sunday because we had a kind of surprise assembly conference meeting, and I had to move that. So I want everybody to join in. We're going to talk about the budget, and it's going to be the after budget aftermath and what it all means for us. And hopefully we can get some input on that. We also are right now arranging between all of our different elected offices another town hall on 70 Mulberry Street. I know that a lot of folks have a lot of concerns about it. I want to make sure that we're actually talking about it, and I want to make sure that we're actually addressing a lot of the community concerns that we have. And the other thing I wanted to talk about really quickly was that, as a lot of you know, we had talked about the need for absentee ballot applications. So folks probably know that I had made sure to ask for our absentee ballots to be mailed. I also found out that we wanted to have expanded access to absentee ballots for our safety. And then also we wanted to make sure, we found out that a lot of different municipalities were allowing online applications, but our city BOE wasn't, and now it is. And so we raised those issues, and we luckily got like a lot of phone calls, and then things moved along, and we actually won. So that was a really big deal. Thank you. And I just wanted to also talk a little bit about unemployment. We have obviously worked endlessly on some of the unemployment issues throughout the district. I will tell you that the questions that Olympia asked were like top of mind. We are definitely trying to make sure that folks can navigate the system a lot easier. A lot of other reps have already talked about that. Our office has been trying to make sure that, whether or not you can't get on the site, whether or not it's, the site froze on you, whether or not it's, language translation, whether or not it's help trying to access these things, we're always trying to make sure that we can help people wherever they're at on it. One of the things that was brought up was the CDFI program. A couple of times it was brought up by other legislators, but one of the things that folks didn't bring up was the fact that, so one of the biggest fights that I've had in Albany for the last however many years was to actually fund our New York CDFI program. And we were one of the only states in the entire nation that has a New York CDFI fund, like has its own statewide CDFI fund, but we've never funded it. And this is the first time that it's been funded. It's $25 million. And we were able to fight for it. So that was a big win. But the thing is, it's like a little late for our state to actually be able to utilize it in the best and effective way. It needed a little bit of a runway for our credit unions, for our community development financial institutions, that's what CDFI means, to be able to really fully utilize it in this time. This is the mechanism in which we would be able to actually dole out, for example, the PPP program that has been kind of botched much more successfully. I think that we raised that issue with our Congresswoman, and I think that we need to continue to raise that issue with our Congress people. And I think that the PPP issue, for example, is really about making sure that we have strings attached to the funding, right? We have to make sure that the that the right barriers are put into place, and that certain folks can really be able to, fight for the things that that we need on the ground. I'm very, very, very worried personally about our small businesses, especially in Chinatown, because of some of the things that have been happening. It's been very, very hard, and due to racism and due to the xenophobia that's been going on, our Chinatown businesses started to suffer starting in like early February, and we really need help. And I started to ask on the state level for help since then, since end of January, because I saw it coming. And I really fear that we're not providing the help that we need. And so we have to think outside of the box. And we have been trying to raise different funds for revolving loans. We've been trying to do different things to help out. And we've also been trying to start different programs. But, it's been really, really upsetting to kind of think about what would happen if we don't find a solution for folks. And there's 6 different programs right now, and I will tell you, none of my small businesses have been able to apply and successfully get any of the resources that were promised. And it's very hard to figure out what would be the best way for us to actually even access those things. I don't think that it should come at like, oh, if a kind, bigger business is able to return their money, maybe it can come to us. But that's not the way I think it should work. I think that we need to make sure that we are guaranteeing that it's coming to us. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that we do need to raise revenue. I think that that's a conversation that we'll have at our budget town hall. But, the pied-à-terre tax is one that we can all agree on. My stock buyback transfer tax, I think, is awesome, right? It's only 0.5% on, that's not even 1%. I don't even know how to talk about it. It's 0.5% on when a big company buys back its own stock, and that doesn't really, hurt anyone or not, it doesn't even impact a person, and so I think that it's really a big deal. I wanted to say that also to Val, we have been such huge supporters. Every single one of the legislators here has been a huge supporter of the safe staffing bill. I think that one is such a huge bill, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because my mom was also a nurse. I was a CNA, and one of the reasons why she actually injured herself was because of the lack of safe staffing. And so we started with a lifting bill, and we wanted to make sure that we have a safe staffing bill as well. I'm also on Ron Kim's bill with Deborah Glick on making sure that we're protecting our nursing homes and also their clients. And then one more thing that I wanted to say was that we got a lot of PPEs for all over the district, and we also got a lot of food supplies, etc. But it's not enough, and I want folks to let me know if there are times that they need things, and we just need to have the information, because we can't help unless we know, right? So please call in, please help, let us know how to help you, because right now I know that there's a lot of folks who still have a lot of pride on things, and I just want to say that now is not it's not shameful at all, right, to ask for help. And I also want to talk about my rent forgiveness bill. Rent forgiveness bill that a lot of folks are talking about, people talk about it as #cancel rent. But I think that it's not as simple as just oh, the rent's canceled. But thank you. And I will make sure to leave some time for questions. But the bill itself is, it's about making sure that there is some cushion, and we as the government should be making that cushion. And this is the same mechanism that we use to make sure that folks during Hurricane Sandy who were injured could have the same kind of help. So it's through DHCR. It's going to be a fund. There's an attached bill for small landlords, and it actually helps commercial rents, residential rents, mortgages, and also make sure that that folks are who are in NYCHA are covered, as well as anybody who who has any kind of rent, etc. The only question I would have is probably for co-ops for maintenance, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, the maintenance, and so I will try to think about what kind of mechanism for that. But everything else would be basically covered. And I just wanted to kind of end on that and give you some time for questions.
So we've got one question. Carlin?
Oh, hello. Yeah,
I saw you this morning.
good morning. Yeah, I want to go to sleep soon, but listen, I have a quick question about the SLA. Is the SLA still processing liquor license applications, or is there a freeze on it? Because I know we're all going to wake up to a new reality when the lockdown and the quarantine pause period is over. But we don't want to be waking up to a rude awakening with bars and nightlife being approved when the community has no input on it.
Yeah, I hear that. So right now we know that there's been like folks who had applied before COVID and they haven't had any replies. So I don't know what's going on with whether or not that's actually happening or not. But then I haven't heard anything about a technical freeze. But I think that we can do a little bit of a checkup on that. We wrote a letter for sure.
We will have an SLA committee meeting report later on. So our chair of that committee can probably speak to that as well. Thank you, Assembly Member Jackie. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for your question. If you want to type it into the chat, we'll make sure to get it to the Assembly Member. We're going to move on now to our Borough President, Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. And I will be quick because you have a wonderful meeting ahead of you. The first thing I want to say is, of course, about community board appointments, and they will be done by Friday, May 1st. We are getting the information out. The hard part is many wonderful people applied to Board 3, and we only have a certain number of openings. So it's always a hard decision, but they will be done. The second issue I want to mention is something that Carlin just talked about. My understanding, and this is where I would love to see the community boards involved, is that the industries, that would be bars, that would be restaurants, that would be hotels, etc., will have a lot of say about what social distancing or recovery looks like. So it's an example of where the community board can say for nightlife or for bars, this is what I think should exist. So, and the governor and the mayor each have their own individuals who are making up the recovery committee. And I want to tell all the community boards, you should say this is what you think. So it's something to think about across boards, maybe a borough board discussion, but it is something, Manhattan is like no other borough. And so we really need to have our own suggestions as to what recovery looks like. I also just want to mention, we've been working on food issues. We're really delighted that Fresh Direct is now paid by the city of New York to work with NYCHA. We're from the top of Manhattan to the bottom. And on Friday, we're on the Lower East Side, working with all the NYCHAs to get them food. Fresh Direct is now doing 500 packets per day as opposed to 400. And we had a lot to do with making sure they come back. I want to also mention open streets. I worked with the bids, and it was the bids who said we want the streets to be open. I know the city council pressured the mayor, and I think that's another example of what does the community board, in your case, Board 3, think, and where should there be, if any, open streets in your community? The mayor, I talked about 40 up to 100 near parks, but you decide, you make a suggestion. The Solid Waste Advisory Board, we also appoint. We have appointed their full 38 for the 2022 term. People live or work in the borough of Manhattan, and I have to be really, I'm very proud of them. This is the most active Solid Waste Advisory Board of all 5 boroughs, and we are working really hard on the issues that, that they care about. There was a discussion earlier about undocumented workers and housing. I have paid a lot of attention to the philanthropy that is being proposed by different organizations, and it's on our website. We will be putting out in our very popular daily newsletters, but you should know that the Soros Foundation, headed up by Patrick Gaspard, has $25 million for undocumented workers. So if there's a housing situation or an unemployment situation, definitely you should let us know. I think you already know that ESCR, the East River Park, is certainly a topic. We've been working with Pratt Center. They're trying to figure out how to have an effective community advisory group. I assume this project's going to go forward, but I want you to know that we've been working with them. I think you have also, and that's going to be a very large project and lots of time. I wanted to talk about Chinatown for a minute. I know that there's some state money to be used for economic development, and we hope that Chinatown gets it So we'll be working with the community board and different stakeholders to try to do that without getting into lots of specifics. I also want to just mention the future is happening very quickly, and part of it is how does technology work? I think as a board, you have done exceptionally well, but we're going to have tomorrow at 6:30, we have a YouTube working with Columbia University. They've been fabulous. We've done one on education. We've done one on small business. We're doing one tomorrow night at 6:30 on technology. And then the next one's going to be on tracing. I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes, but California has got it down. They are tracing for better or for worse. Some people may have a challenge with it, every neighborhood to find out who's staying in and who's not. And guess what? People are not dying. And it's a very different approach. So there are different companies that are looking at that issue. We'll be talking about that and just education, community boards, digital divide, and everything else. Obviously, it's a topic that I love and know quite a bit about. And we're also doing something more tomorrow at 2 o'clock on women's suffrage. As you know, this is the 100th anniversary, and there will be a August 26th unveiling of a statue of suffragists in Central Park. So make sure you talk to Brian Lewis in our office. We will have masks. We have many being delivered to our office on Friday. They don't go for everywhere. They're not going to take care of all of Manhattan. But if you have some specific needs, please let Brian know, because we will try to address them and get them delivered. And thank you very much. Hope you read our newsletter. And congratulations to your amazing virtual community board meeting.
Thank you, Borough President, we appreciate it. We've got a couple of questions for you. We're going to start with Trevor Holland.
Hi, Trevor.
Hi, Gail. Thank you for that report. Just have
you.
a question about open space, streets, parks in Manhattan. Obviously, we're constrained for space, and the city has announced severe cuts to parks. And it seems a little odd because that's where people are going to go for recreation, with pools being closed, and we don't know what's going to happen with beaches and other areas. I didn't see a task force from the city about this particular issue, and I'm wondering, how do we raise this issue about funding for parks so that we can make sure that the areas that are going to be heavily used have the maintenance and staff to take care of these areas?
I would do two things, Trevor. It's a very good question. I mean, we're dealing with summer youth employment program and organics and parks, and it's a city council and the mayor. So that's one focus, which you've done for years. There will be cuts, but I can think of a whole lot of other ones personally, having worked on the budget for many years besides parks. So that's one. The second is the mayor has, I don't have it in front of me, but it's on his website. He has appointed about 10, I think, or 12 individuals to be part of recovery. And it seems to me that parks should be part of recovery. So that's another place to put focus, is seeing who you know, or just make sure that as a board or as a community, you tell them the same thing. And then the third thing is, the mayor said open streets will be near parks. So if there's a street that you think should be open that's near a park, I know you don't have a lot of park, but that would be another place to say, we need the park open and we need the street open, and they should work together. That would be my suggestion. So city council, mayor's advisory, the governor also has an advisory, it's 3 pages long. A lot of it is upstate, but that would be another place to put pressure. And then of course, trying to figure out locally about open streets.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from Robin Chattel. Robin?
Yes, hi. Hi, Gail.
Hi, Robin.
All the work you're doing, your newsletters are just so amazing. I wanted to ask you about the East River. I know that there's plans to put this community group together, but has there been any changes to the time frame for that park? And I know that there's a big concern, of course, if parks are closing, that is one park in our area during this crisis that is really needed more than ever.
Yeah. I haven't heard about any change. Obviously, the advisory group could say this is what we want, this is different than before COVID, etc. But I have not heard about any changes, but we can let you know. The community board will hear about anything at the same time we do.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. And our last question is coming from Valentina Jones. Valentina?
You said that the in terms of the bars and the clubs and whatnot, my concern is that you have somebody in terms of healthcare, because the bottom line is this virus has like known amounts of time that it sits in the air. It has known amounts of times of transmission, and that's a health situation. So I would hope that this is not just determined by nice people or whatever, that you have some people that know healthcare and know about this virus, because the transmission of this virus is known. This is not something that's not known. Droplet infection is known. So I would hope that you have some health people on there and that is taken into consideration, the transmission of this virus, the amount of time it stays in the air. That's not one thing.
No, I think it's a great point. I was just stating, I mean, I'm nervous about everything, but now I'm nervous about what does recovery include? And I want the community boards to have say. And so obviously I feel very strongly about the health, but I am sure that as we sit here today, the governor who will decide what's essential and what's not, and when it gets rolled out and so on. He said the next couple of weeks is going to be construction and manufacturing, and then there'll be, an assessment, and then the next one and the next one. He did say that the industries are going to rule. In other words, the bars will decide, and then he'll look at it, or the restaurants will decide 50 chairs, I'm making this up, instead of 100. So I'm just saying, I want the community boards to have a say. That's what I was trying to get across. And so health is a huge number one in my book, but if things are going to be rolled out, I want you to have a say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Borough President. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We are going to move on to reports from the representatives, some elected officials who were not able to join us tonight. I do not see Andrew from the mayor's office on. I don't see Lila from Public Advocate Jumani Williams' office on, and I don't see Ling Shah from Nidia Velasquez's office on. If anybody is on from any of those offices, if you'd please raise your hand, and we will go straight to Michael Stinson from Controller Scott Stringer's office.
Hi, everybody. I hope next week or next month we can turn this into a telethon, because this meeting has been very long. I just have 3 quick updates from the Controller's office. Just today, we announced a new telephone campaign to return over $2.5 million in unclaimed prevailing wages to workers cheated out of their pay by contractors on city-funded projects. The Controller's Bureau of Labor Law enforces prevailing wage and benefit rates for construction and building service workers employed by contractors on city public work projects. The phone calls notifying workers are going to be made by, and many of these are immigrant workers, they're being made by employees of our Bureau of Labor Law who are conducting intensive research to find telephone numbers and email addresses for workers with unclaimed wages. Anecdotal evidence indicates many workers are afraid to respond to calls and emails because they fear it as a scam, making widespread public awareness essential to connect employees with the prevailing wage awards. So we are doing some heavy press on this to try to get the word out. And if you guys could help us get the word out on this, it'd be greatly appreciated. Another thing that we have going on every Tuesday and Thursday, we are having presentations via Zoom on resources from federal, state, and government, city government, on the private sector available to small businesses and MWBEs impacted by COVID-19. Presentations are taking place every Tuesday and Thursday, again, as I said, at 10 a.m. until at least May 14th. Interpretation is available in sign language, Arabic, Bengali, Cantonese, French, Haitian Creole, Korean, Mandarin, Polish, Russian, Spanish, and Urdu. Please share that as well. We've had, I think, 4 or 5 of them so far. All of them have had over 200 people, and we just want to get the word out to as many small businesses as we can to help as much as we can. And finally, we released, to try to compete with the Borough President's daily newsletter, we have our own online resource center to support New Yorkers through the pandemic. The hub was crucial information on available government programs, recent policy changes, options for financial support, and organizations you can look to for additional help. Whether you're a homeowner or tenant, want resources for nonprofits, small businesses, or freelancers, are concerned about New York seniors, students, or immigrant communities, our resource centers information you can use. Please contact COVID update at controller.nyc.gov, and I'll share this in the chat group. If you have any questions about the information presented in the resource center or would like to submit a resource to be included. And that's all I got. Thank you guys for doing this again.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm sure if you review the tape from last month, we got you on earlier this time. So we're willing to bet dinner on that. Are there any questions for the Controller's Office before we move on? All right, seeing none, we are going to move on to our roll call vote, and we're going to do this the same way we did last time. Eric will call roll call, and each member will just unmute themselves to vote, and then mute yourselves right away.
Hey, David Adams.
Yes, I'm here. I was here, not there, but I'm here.
Oh, gotcha. Yaron Altman. Yaron Altman. Yaron? Okay. Jesse Beck. Jesse Beck?
Yes.
Got you. Dominic Berg.
Sorry, Yaron's here. Sorry about that.
Okay, got you, Yaron.
You hear me?
Dominic Berg.
Yeah, we got you, Dominic.
Okay.
Lee Berman.
Yes.
Carlin Chan.
Yes, I'm here.
Jonathan Chu. Jonathan Chu. Okay, absent. David Crane. David Crane. David Crane absent.
He's on, hold on. David? David, you need to press the space bar, there you go. David?
1 second. All right.
All right, let's move on.
But Felicia Cruikshank. Felicia?
She's not on.
Absent. Eric Diaz. Yes. Alistair Economakis.
Yes.
Okay. Shirley Fennessy. Shirley.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
She's not there anymore. She was in as an attendee, but I promoted her and then she dropped off.
Okay. Ryan Gilliam. Ryan Gilliam.
She's not on.
Absent. Deborah Glass.
Yes.
Okay. Herman Hewitt.
Yes.
Okay. Trevor Holland.
Yes.
Linda Jones.
Yes.
Valentina Jones.
Yes.
Okay. Tatiana Jorio.
Yes.
Okay. Megan Joy.
Yes.
All right. Lisa Kaplan. Lisa Kaplan.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself doing it the hard way. Just one question. Are we just doing attendance or are we voting on minutes?
Attendance and minutes.
Thank you. That wasn't made clear. So just thank you. Yes.
Okay. Olympia Kazi.
Yes.
Okay. Joseph Kearns.
Yes.
Michelle Coopersmith.
Yes.
Okay. May Lee.
Yes.
All right. Alicia Lewis Coleman.
Yes.
Got you. Ellen Liu.
Yes.
Okay. Michael Marino.
Yes, and why wasn't I invited to the dance party?
Alexandra Militano.
Yes.
All right. Michael Perles.
Yes.
Paul Rangel.
Yes.
Shout out to Paul Rangel.
Oh, Shirley says she's back.
Okay, I'll look for her. She keeps joining as an attendee, so I'll move her back over.
All right. I'll update Shirley. Carolyn Ratcliffe.
Here. Yes.
Okay. Damaris Reyes.
Here.
Okay. Richard Ropiak.
Here. Yes.
Okay. Thomas Rosa.
Yes.
Okay. Robin Chattel.
Yes.
All right. Heidi Schmidt. Heidi Schmidt.
Not on.
All right. Larissa Scheinberg.
I'm sorry, she is on.
Heidi?
Yeah. I don't know why she can't speak, but she's here. Hold on, she might be in the attendee.
Larissa Scheinberg. Larissa? Clint Smeltzer.
Yes.
Okay. Anisha Stephen.
Yes.
Okay. Congrats, Anisha. Sandra Strother.
Yes.
Josephine Velez.
Here.
Okay. Rodney Washington. Rodney Washington.
He's on. Let me try to unmute him. Go ahead.
No, I messed up over here.
That's all right. We got you now.
Okay, you got me?
Yeah.
All right.
Gotcha. Kathleen Webster.
Here.
Jackie Wong.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Eric, we should have Shirley Fennessy, David Crane, and Heidi Schmidt on. They can probably unmute themselves now.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, David, thank you.
This is crazy. I got on the meeting at the first and I couldn't hear anything. Apparently I could speak then.
Got you. All right. All those names have been represented and are present.
All right. So, Alicia, I hand it off to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for, can everyone see me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a weird screen in front of me. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And thank you all for attending tonight's full board meeting. I want to first start off by congratulating all our newly appointed full board members as they will come on as of Friday. Hopefully, they will all get their announcement letters and they will be appointed on Friday. And if there are any members, any new full board members that are on the line at the moment, I want to encourage you to attend upcoming May committee meetings. Check out our website. And if you haven't been there already, please make sure you are checking in on the Community Board 3 website, okay? Also, I want to thank our elected officials for being on the front lines, distributing meals, checking in on our community, and doing the hard work as we are dealing with this epidemic and this pandemic at the moment. Business for Community Board, goodbye to Megan Joy. I want everyone to give her a standing ovation, a hand clap, an applaud, because she has done an exceptional job as our Economic Development Chair. She is now passing on the baton to Anisha Stephen. Thank you so much for Anisha for stepping up to be our new Economic Development Chairperson. We look forward to working closely with you as you have already done a great job of sitting on various committee and meetings that will affect economic development for our community. Thank you so very much. We've decided during executive meeting this month, we decided that we were going to add additional executive meetings to deal with the concerns and issues that may arise before the end of the month. So we will be having at least 2 executive committee meetings. So you're welcome to attend those if you wish. But this is to just make sure that we're checking in. If we don't need them, then we will eliminate one of them. But definitely we will definitely be checking in to make sure that we're doing okay. And if there's anything that arises, we will deal with it as needed. I want to encourage all of you to please continue to check in on seniors, disabled members of our community, and single parents as they may be in need of support. Many people do not have extended family nearby. And if you are a concerned neighbor or citizen, I encourage you to please look out for fellow board community members in your area, in your building, or wherever you may live, to please just be a good neighbor, be a good friend, and check in on people. Meals are being distributed as, you know, for people that can't get out. If they call 311, they answer no to everything and they will get meals delivered to their doors. School Foods is definitely doing a daily Monday through Friday meal distribution. You can get a breakfast and 2 lunches per person in your household, no questions asked, no ID needed. And some other local organizations, shout out to Eric's organization. We want to thank Eric for being on the front line as well. He's an example. Him, and I do know Damaris, and I do know that Sandra Struthers, I believe all of you guys have been out there distributing meals in the community. I apologize if there are others and I haven't seen you, but I want to thank those 3 members for doing an exceptional job of going out to the developments and making sure that there's food being distributed to our seniors and our very vulnerable community. If you have any need to reach out to me, I encourage you to please contact me through the cb3chair@gmail.com. You're all welcome to send me an email of any issues or concerns you feel like we need to address and have not addressed during this time. Thank you so very much. And I believe that's it for my chair's report. Now we're going to move on to the district manager's report. Susan?
Okay, thank you. I'm on? You can hear? Thank you. So the staff has been working remotely for about 5 weeks now. We have access through a program to our office computers and to city agency functions, but it's all very slow. So we're trying to work on the most prioritized issues. We expect that the committees will all have meetings in June, and that will have the district needs statement on the agenda. The district managers have already started working with Office of Management and Budget on budget priorities for September budget consultations. And I will be asking the committees in June for any questions they want to put on the agendas, and I'll work more with the chairs on this. Under the heading of Don't Believe Everything You Read, I want to correct a report about SDR soccer fields that I read. It was reported that fields were now being opened in response to local complaints. What really happened is the park has been having a lot of problems with lack of social distancing, with many homeless and people involved with drugs. And the soccer fields were closed for a few days and are now open, but they're being opened later than usual in the day because of a staffing shortage. There are also more police now assigned to this park. So I'm glad the elected officials talked about some of their work, because there is such an amazing amount of work from our local nonprofits and our elected officials that has been going on, you know, feeding people, hundreds and hundreds of calls for wellness checks, and new groups have formed, such as East Village Neighbors. Some of the agencies are having weekly calls. I've been on the Get Food calls, which is a coordination of all food activities under Catherine Garcia. Department of Homeless Services is also having weekly calls. And, you know, there are a lot of gaps, a lot of things are falling through, there are a lot of problems, but I am also at the same time very impressed by the tremendous amount of work being done, and people both at the agencies and nonprofits that are doing everything they can and care very much. There have also been a few calls about 70 Mulberry Street, which is a fire damaged building. And as a result of those calls, that will be on the land use committee agenda for May. And I think there will probably be a request for a vote on that. And I just would like, lastly, to make sure that particularly for newer members in the community, to understand how our community is organized to respond to disaster. We have a unique history in Lower East Side of creating collaborative models for the nonprofits to work together and not compete. Lower East Side Employment Network is an example. So is Lower East Side Ready, which is a coalition of over 30 community-based organizations and groups that coordinate a joint response. They formed in response to the disaster after Superstorm Sandy. That happened informally and kind of spontaneously. After Second Avenue explosion, they responded formally in partnership with the mayor's office. And they're now have been working for several weeks with elected officials, with agencies and other groups to coordinate their work. One of the things they've done, which we have posted on social media, is a volunteer form that all the organizations and all the elected officials can pull from that one form, and you able to match volunteers up with their interests. The coalition is chaired by Damaris Reyes, and who's our board member, and Niall Harrington. And I found their weekly calls for everyone to share information incredibly productive. I just want to comment, there's been some questions about the SLA. The SLA was backlogged by 6 months before the before COVID-19. I don't know if they're worse now, but it was a 6-month backlog before. What has changed now, they're still having their meetings, but the public can submit testimony. They cannot appear. There's no opportunity to ask and answer questions, which is why I think many in the community are frustrated. And that's it, unless there's questions. Okay.
There are no raised hands, so we can.
So my hand was raised. I put it in the chat because the feature has disappeared. This is Olympia.
Okay, well, I am sharing the agenda on the screen, which is why your pictures probably disappeared, but you can set it up so that you can see the pictures on the side, but I did not see any raised hands, so I apologize.
So,
But go ahead with your question.
So my question, Susan, is about the district needs. You know, I don't know how many have seen, sadly, there are crazy cuts that this year's budget has. So our district needs may look very, very different than other years. So I was wondering if the district office is in a place to share updates about what is the mayor actually cutting, and this way we can have more informed decisions.
Okay, so the district needs are not about the current budget cuts. The current budget cut, and I should have added that we have just had $4,000 taken out of our current budget and $8,000 out of the budget starting in July. So the current budget cuts that are from the executive budget are for the year starting July 1st. We have already voted on what we want. What we are doing now in response to some of the cuts, particularly for parks and for SYEP, is writing letters. We've already voted. So we're writing letters on the things we've already voted for the budget starting in July to advocate for them not being cut. The district needs is not, first of all, it's not budget priorities. That happens in September. The district needs, which is for the year starting in July 2021. And, you know, I agree with you. It's going to be very, very different. You know, we're going to be coming from a completely another place that we've never known before. And I think the committees are going to have to figure out how they're going to respond. It's going to be very, very difficult.
Any other questions from people?
I just want to say that the committee chairs have all received the executive budget, but I assume everybody pretty much has seen the executive budget and budget cuts for this coming July.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Alicia, do you want to move on to committee reports? Alicia?
I'm muted again.
You're good now. You can talk now. Go ahead.
Okay. So yes.
I'm sorry. Just a reminder of everybody, when you're done talking, I am muting you if you're not muting yourself, because background noise messes up the recording.
Thank you, Michael. So yes, so we have executive, I already covered it in my chair's report. So we'll go on to transportation, which I believe had no meeting this month.
We had no meeting this month.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome back. Economic development.
We didn't meet.
And again, we'd like to thank Megan for her service. Parks, recreational, waterfront, and resiliency.
We did meet and we had one vote. It's attached on the agenda. It's support plans for the Thompson Square Park Fieldhouse reconstruction. Any questions? Thank you.
I have a question for Parks, if I can.
Go ahead, Lee.
Hi, Trevor. Just wondering if there's any update on the interim flood protection study for ESCR.
There is no update. We've been told that it's on pause like every other project, but we don't have any other updates, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Okay.
Health and Human Services.
Hi. So we actually did not meet this past month. However, we did draft a letter for the full restoration of summer youth employment program. It was the mayor announced, just summarily announced that it would be canceled this summer, and the nonprofits received 48 hours notice. So we wrote a letter for full restoration of the program for this summer. Many of the nonprofits already have ideas about how to implement this program this summer, even in spite of all the social distancing requirements. Many of the other community boards are also writing letters just about the district needs. I think, I work for a nonprofit. I know some of the committee members and board members do. And, right now the nonprofits are just dealing with what's happening right now and dealing with any budget cuts for this coming fiscal year. But some of them are thinking about the next fiscal year. Right now, they don't have an exact concrete idea, but I think that maybe in a month or a little bit more than a month, they will have or start thinking about it more after this fiscal year starts. And then also I went to the Community Education Council meeting, which deals with the New York City Department of Education. They are getting a lot of budget cuts, but also we will work with the CEC to find out what the needs are in terms of BOE and in terms of budget priorities. So that'll also be like a little later. So hopefully in August in August we will vote on something. Or July. Oh, any questions? That's the end of my report.
Thank you, May.
Okay.
SLA.
There are 3 resolutions from the meeting this month. There's also one item of old business. The item of old business was a hotel liquor license that we approved last month, but they subsequently told us that they weren't going to sign the stipulations regarding their operating. That's it.
Are there any questions for SLA? David Adams, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hi. I got a cutout. I didn't hear what you said was the result of the what happened with the change that they didn't sign. I didn't hear the full report.
Sure. The item of old business is at the end of the vote sheet. It's for a hotel liquor license on Orchard Street. We voted to approve them last month, understanding they were going to sign the stipulations regarding the method of operation, but they decided not to. So it's just a vote to deny based on the fact that we, created stipulations based on their application and they didn't sign them.
Okay, thank you. I thought that's what you said, but I wanted to be sure. Okay, bye.
Sure.
Thank you, David. Any other questions for SLA?
Landmarks.
Landmarks?
Linda?
I can't unmute. Oh, there. Landmarks did not meet.
Okay, and land use?
We didn't meet.
Okay, is there any old business?
Sorry, I raised my hand for land use that didn't meet.
Sorry, I'm just seeing that now, Olympia. Go ahead.
My question is, they just started voting again at City Council for ULERPs and stuff like that. And I know that we were scheduled when the crisis hit, we were scheduled to have a presentation about the two bridges rezoning from the applicants. And I mean, I don't know what is happening, but there is some movement with there are committee hearings now at City Council, etc. So since we didn't see the calendar for next month, I heard Alicia said we have two executives, but is some monitoring that are we going to have land use, like, because there is movement there.
So
yeah, draft sheet out, right, Jackie?
yeah, so actually the DCP have given us some response on the two bridges rezoning effort made by the co-applicants. And I think we were trying to make a presentation back in March, but because of the pandemic issue, that was not able to be held. But we are talking with the co-applicants. I think we're going to regroup. We talk about regrouping in early May to see what we can report back to the community board.
So that I understand correctly, you're saying there is going to be a meeting or there is not going to be a land use meeting?
For May, there is going to be a land use meeting. But the agenda would be on 70 Mulberry Street, as Susan has mentioned before. In terms of two bridges applications, I think I'm not sure if I want to put that on the May agenda yet. After I would discuss with the co-applicants. Yep.
All right, there's some more hands raised now, so we'll go to Trevor and then Carlin.
Just clarification, and this relates to two bridges, because I thought we weren't going to have anything on the agenda that did not require a vote or immediate action. Is that still the case, or are we, because I mean, that's a discussion as opposed to a vote. Not that I don't want to see it on land use, but we were holding off because it's not a vote, it's more of an update.
That is correct, Trevor. It is.
I can't raise my hand.
Susan, we can't hear you.
I said I could, for some reason, I can't raise my hand anymore, so I just wanted you to know to call on me.
Okay. So Carlin, and then we'll go to Susan.
Yeah, this is a question for land use. The meeting on 70 Mulberry, what is that about? Is that for future use of the site or something? Is that to decide what to build at the site after they do a full demo?
So city agency is planning to come to us to talk about what they wanted to do with the site, whether, because there are different opinions about the site, and they're gonna give us a presentation on the update. Also, if the site need to be demolished, or we can keep it as is.
Okay, I have the nonprofits that were residing inside 70 Mulberry. They received notice from the city that the full demolition has been approved. All right, the HD Chen Dance Company made a public announcement about it. I caught wind of it 3 weeks ago, but since I don't have the email, I couldn't say anything about it. But but the tenants have received notice from the city already. Right? Are they? Is this a planning meeting for a 20-story tower or something? And if it is, shouldn't it be held off until the public has a chance to weigh in on it and not via Zoom?
Susan?
You're muted, Susan.
Okay. I think they are going to look for a vote. We're certainly going to want everybody to come, community and the nonprofits that are still in there. And I don't think we have to continue having meetings. We have no idea when Zoom meetings are going to stop. And we don't want to lose our opportunity to be able to make comments. So there will be presentation. DCA is going to lead the presentation. They will bring other agencies to weigh in on. As far as other agenda items, it's kind of late to add, if you look at, our procedures, it's kind of late. It doesn't seem like an issue, but we usually put things on the agenda before the full board. But yes, I expect there will be a lot of people coming to weigh in on the 70 Mulberry, and I will, certainly try and do outreach and ask others, such as you, Carlin, to please help do outreach for that.
All right, we've got a raised hand now from Robin.
No, I'm just trying to confirm the date for this meeting. So there's a
May
14th.
May 14th, and the full schedule of meetings for May will be released by the office, I believe, tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow is a mistake for sure.
Any other questions? All right. So back to the end of our agenda.
Okay, so so that was any old business? Any new business?
I just want to make a quick reminder that we are going to adjourn this meeting, and then we will have a brief meeting regarding Friends of CB3 afterwards. So if you are interested in hearing more about that, you should stay on to the Zoom after we adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Michael, for that reminder. So that being said, if there's nothing else to address, again, we want to send an extended welcome to Anisha Stephen as the new Economic Development Chairperson, and also to the new members that are coming on board as of May 1st. Hopefully everyone will get an opportunity to attend a committee meeting. There are 5 new members. I encourage everyone as they come on board, I will be looking for mentors. It is extremely important to have a mentor the first couple of months on the community board. So if you're interested in being a mentor, please let me know. It should be someone that is a little more seasoned as a board member, someone preferably that has no issues with attendance or anything of that sort. So please let me know if you are interested in being a mentor for our new members. Thank you all. Now we will have a vote, roll call vote. Eric?
Eric, you're unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, my son just had a little episode.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
ready. David Adams.
Yes, here.
Okay. Yaron Altman.
Yes.
Okay. Jesse Beck.
Yes.
Okay. Dominic Berg.
Yes.
Lee Berman.
Yes.
All right. Carlin Chan.
Yes.
All right. Jonathan Chu. Jonathan Chu. David Crane. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I was just saying he's not on.
Okay. David
Yes,
Crane.
David Crane, yes.
All right. Felicia Cruikshank. Felicia. All right, moving on. Eric Diaz, yes. Alistair Akinamakis.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Shirley Fantasy.
Yes.
Okay. Ryan Gilliam. Ryan Gilliam. Okay. Deborah Glass.
Yes.
Herman Hewitt.
Yes.
Okay. Trevor Holland. Trevor.
Yes.
Okay. Linda Jones. Linda Jones.
She's on, hold on.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, got it.
What do you?
Valentina Jones.
Yes.
Okay. Tatiana Jurio.
Yes.
Okay. Megan Joy.
Yes.
Thank you, Megan. Lisa Kaplan.
Yes.
Olympia Kazi.
Yes.
Okay. Joseph Kearns. Joseph Kearns.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, got it. Michelle Cooper Smith.
Yes.
Okay. May Lee.
Yes.
Okay. Alicia Lewis Coleman.
Yes.
Ellen Liu.
Yes.
Okay. Michael Marino.
Yes.
Alexandra Militano.
Yes.
Okay. Michael Perlis.
Yes.
Paul Rangel.
Yes.
All right. Carolyn Ratcliffe.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Damaris Reyes. Damaris Reyes. Damaris?
She's on.
I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute. I'm here.
Okay.
Damaris.
Okay, got you. Richard Ropiak.
Yes.
Okay. Thomas Rosa.
Yes.
Okay. Robin Chattel. Robin? Okay,
Yes.
got you. All right. Heidi Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay. Larissa Scheinberg. Larissa Scheinberg. Nope. Clint Smeltzer.
Yes.
Okay. Anisha Stephen. Anisha.
Yes.
Got you. Sandra Strother. Sandra Strother.
Hold on. Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah.
Okay. Josephine Velez.
Yes.
Okay. Rodney Washington. Rodney Washington.
Yes.
Got you. Kathleen Webster
Yep.
and Jackie Wong. Jackie Wong.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so that concludes. Really quickly, I'm sorry, I should have given a thank you to our social media So Joe Kearns, thank you. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone that has been involved in keeping us all abreast on our social media page. And that concludes our meeting. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, everyone, be safe.
But stay on the meeting.
All right, I am going to stop the recording of this meeting. If you want to hear about